Assalamu alaikum. So today we are going to do research designs, quantitative and qualitative research designs. Now, the first research design that we are going to study is ethnography. Qualitative research design is ethnography. Ethnography is based almost entirely on fieldwork. The ethnographer lives among the people who are the subject of the study for a year or more, learning the local language and participating in everyday life while striving to maintain a degree of objective detachment. So basically, ethnographic research is the one where the researcher lives among the people as the part of that community, as a part of their life. Okay, focusing and on their life, on the life of that community, but participating with them as well. Okay, as if he's one of them. Okay, but when he's collecting the data, he or she has to maintain the objectivity, means he should not include any biasness in his opinions. Okay. uh, Now, focusing on the second one, there is a case study. Basically, a case study is an in-depth study of one person. Much of the Freud's work and theories were developed through individual case studies. In a case study, nearly every aspect of the subject's life and the history is analyzed to seek patterns and cause for behavior. So basically, case study is also an in-depth study, just like ethnography, but the basic difference is that in ethnographic research, researcher has to become a part of that environment. Okay, whereas case study, uh, I mean, the researcher is just observing that particular case from, you can say, not being a part of that society. Okay, now this case can be one person or a group of person or events. Okay, but case study is an intense analysis of individual unit. This unit can be a single person, a group, a community, an event, stressing developmental factors in relation to context. So case study is very common in social sciences and life sciences. Okay, so case studies are also usually qualitative studies, research designs, but these days even quantitative case studies are also very common. Now, the third qualitative research design is the action research. Action research is basically a form of self-reflective inquiry undertaken by participants in social situation in order to improve the rationality and justice of, number one, their own social and educational practices, number two, their understanding of these practices, and number three, the situation in which the practices are carried out. So basically, usually this action research is commonly known as the classroom research, that is usually done by the teachers. Okay, and on the basis of their reflection, this particular research is written. Okay, so that's why it is a form of self-reflective inquiry undertaken by the participant. Okay, and in this case, researcher is also a part, means researcher is also taking part in this research. Okay, it means he or she is also reflecting, evaluating the things at the same time, participating in the activity. The researcher is not actually the part of that community. Ethnography की तरह नहीं कि part बन गए, लेकिन जो है कहीं ना कहीं वो involve होता है डेटा collection या डेटा जो आपके participant है उनकी support के लिए. And this particular research is done to make some, I mean, to improve the rationality and justice of social and educational practices, or understanding of the practices, or if some change is to be brought in that practices. Now, if we talk about the content analysis, the term content analysis is often used globally. As I've mentioned many times, that content analysis is not only a research design, but it is an research evaluation tool as well. ठीक है, data collection tool, data collect करके आप जो analyze करते हैं, data analysis tool भी है ये, ठीक है. But right now we are discussing content analysis as a research design. Okay, that's why it is written slopily, because it can be used in both the senses. In fact, it simply defines the process of summarizing and reporting written data. Now, if we talk about content analysis as a research design, so it is just summarizing or the reporting of the written material, written data. In content analysis, you study different material and then you note it down, you write it down as a research. Okay, so the main content of the data and the messages are written down as in the form of the research. Usually the thematic papers, usually literature researches or secondary researches are done through content analysis. Okay. Now the fifth one is the historical research. Historical research is different from other researches as it stands alone, being the initial and the basic knowledge of any topic to be researched. So it means historical research is basically that focuses on the history of something that is already done. Okay, it also different because it deals majorly with the past of an occurrence or happening of an experiment, incident, progress, or a forecast, future prediction. Okay, so basically this mainly focuses on something that had happened in the past, and that past can be an experiment, can incident, any progress, or any forecast. Future predictions can also be done through this historical researches. Now, these were the 5 researchers that I have discussed in the class as well. Now, moving on towards some more qualitative research designs, that is the developmental research. Now, I'm going to discuss all these in detail. Now, developmental research has been defined as a systematic study of designing, developing, and evaluating instructional programs, processes, and products that must meet criteria of internal consistency and effectiveness. Developmental research is particularly important in the field of instructional technology. The most common type of developmental research involves situations in which the product development process is analyzed and described, and the final product is evaluated. So basically, developmental research is a research in which some particular criteria is observed, is consistency, its effectiveness is checked, right? For example, you can take the example of Sunsilk. ठीक है, आपके जैसे सर्वे लेने के लिए आते हैं, ठीक है, सर्वे कलेक्ट करने के लिए आते हैं कि भैया आप कौन सा शैम्पू यूज कर रहे हैं और कब से यूज कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, कौन से साइज का यूज करते हैं, ठीक है, वो और क्या आपका ओपिनियन है, किससे क्या होना चाहिए। इस तरह से करते करते आपने देखा होगा कि जो शैम्पूज के कितनी उसमें सनसिल्क में कितनी वेराइटी आ गई है, ठीक है, कितने ब्लैक है, एग वाला है, नाउ they have introduced a new one that is the green one, ठीक है, that is for the people who wear scarves. So this is developmental, you can say, focusing on this particular change कि क्या change आ रहा है, कितना effective है, लोग उसको किस तरह से ले रहे हैं, ये भी developmental research में आ सकता है। अगर हम English की बात करें, if we talk about the language, then the way this like for example the coaching centers, Domino's and PSCC जो होता था, इस तरह के जो लैंग्वेज सेंटर्स हैं जहाँ पे लेवल्स होते हैं लैंग्वेज लर्निंग के, दे आर एक्चुअली डूइंग नोटिंग डाउन द इम्प्रूवमेंट ऑफ their language, right? So if that is printed, that will also become a developmental research. Okay, so basically it evaluates the instructional programs, processes, and products. All these three are involved. अभी 2 चीजों की मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दे दी है, प्रोडक्ट दैट इज जो सेंसिल की एग्जांपल दी, और प्रोग्राम, इंस्ट्रक्शनल प्रोग्राम जो वो लेवल वाले इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज लर्निंग्स के होते हैं, ठीक है। सो इन ऑर्डर टू मीट द क्राइटेरिया ऑफ इंटरनल कंसिस्टेंसी एंड इफेक्टिवनेस, developmental research is particularly important in the field of instructional technology. So mostly it is involved where instructions are there, and technology is involved in it. The most common types of developmental research involve situations in which the product development process is analyzed and described, and the final product is evaluated. So when there is some development is focused कि किस तरह से क्या हो रहा है, जैसे अगर हम अपने यहाँ की बात करें, अपनी यूनिवर्सिटी की, कि किस तरह से पहले MA स्टार्ट, BS को चले एग्जाम्पल ले लेते हैं, BS जो स्टार्ट हुआ था 2007 में, तो उस वक्त जो है वो ओवरऑल फाइनल ईयर कंबाइन था। अगर इंग्लिश की बात करें तो इंग्लिश, लिटरेचर एंड लिंग्विस्टिक्स वर कंबाइन, ठीक है। देन हाउ इट चेंजेस फ्रॉम आई मीन द फाइनल ईयर चेंज इनटू फाइनल ईयर BS4 लिटरेचर एंड BS4 लिंग्विस्टिक्स, ठीक है, वो अलग अलग हो गया बिकॉज ऑफ द रिक्वायरमेंट, सम चेंजेस वर डन, एंड दिस इज अ सॉर्ट ऑफ डेवलपमेंट एज वेल. How the program is developing, how it is evolving, how new courses are included in it, and why they are included. On the basis of some analysis, obviously they are included and removed. Now A second type of developmental research focuses more on the impact of the product on the learner or the organization. A third type of study is oriented towards a general analysis of the design, development, or evaluation process as a whole or as component. Okay, so basically, developmental research focuses on the development of some program or process or product. Now, the next research design is longitudinal research. We have studied this longitudinal research in the type of research on the basis of time as well. ठीक है, तो ये जो है on the basis of time तो है ही, लेकिन it is also a research design as well. ठीक है, a qualitative research design. Longitudinal study is correlational research study that involves repeated observation of the same variable over a long period of time, often many decades. So usually longitudinal studies are for years, for decades. Decades means 10 years. Okay? So sometimes 20, 30 years as well. Okay? But it can be like, for example, the COSI experiments, okay, where the data is collected twice or thrice throughout the semester. Then that is also included in longitudinal study, longitudinal research. Longitudinal, it is a type of observational study. Usually longitudinal studies are based on observations. Detailed data is collected. That's why this is a qualitative research design. Longitudinal studies are often used in psychology to study developmental trends across the lifespan, and in sociology to study life events throughout lifetime or generations. The reason for this is that, unlike cross-sectional studies, longitudinal studies track the same people, and therefore the differences observed in those people are less likely to be the result of the cultural differences across generations. Okay, so basically longitudinal studies or longitudinal researches focus on the same people with a long passage of time. That's why, or you can say it track the same people and their activities, how they are changing with the passage of time, with because of the change of the age, because of some situation, institutional background and all. जैसे school में थे, फिर college में आए, फिर university में आए, what changes they have faced in their behavior, in their attitudes, and so on. Okay, so if any specific particular people are focused, then that will be longitudinal research. Now, because of this benefit, longitudinal studies make observing changes more accurate and they're applied in various other fields. Okay, so even अगर हम बात करें developmental research की, तो developmental research में भी I mean ये दोनों का mixture भी हो सकता है, developmental research और longitudinal research का, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं अगर on the basis of time देखें तो developmental research में भी अगर data 2 3 4 दफा collect हो रहा है, तो it will take time in order to observe the development of the personality of the student or the product or the institute. Okay, so that is also a sort of longitudinal study. Now, in medicine, the design is used to uncover predicators of certain disease. In advertising, the design is used to identify the change that advertising has produced in the attitudes and behavior of those within the target audience who have seen the advertising campaign. Okay, so this type of research, longitudinal research, can be used in not only in medicines or in science, but in advertisements as well, for advertisements as well, and in English as well, for English researchers as well. Now, the last type of qualitative research that I've mentioned here is the grounded theory. Basically, this is a research approach designed to discover what problems exist in a given social environment and how the persons involved handle them. It involves formulation, testing, and reformulation of propositions until a theory is developed. Okay, so basically, grounded theory research is it focuses on some kind of theory. Okay, different tests, different formulas are applied in order to produce or give some theory. जैसे sciences में होता है ज्यादातर कि कोई social setting देखते हैं आप, जैसे ये हो रहा है कोरोना की अगर बात करें तो इनका जो कोरोना की थ्योरी आपने देखा होगा, स्टार्टिंग में क्या क्या कहा जा रहा था कि किस तरह का है। पहले कहा कि नहीं एयरबॉर्न नहीं है, एयर के थ्रू नहीं हो सकता, ट्रेवल नहीं कर सकता। फिर कहा गया कि नहीं एयर के थ्रू हो रहा है। सो डिफरेंट the problem is exist in the social environment, and the people are handling it, and it involves formulation testing was were done, reformulation of propositions were there, and then a theory is developed कि भाई finally ये कोरोना वायरस इस तरह का है और इस तरह से फैलता है. It took almost around 8 to 10 months in order to finalize this particular theory, और फिर उसके बाद उसकी वैक्सीन बनना शुरू हुई. ओके, सो पहले तो यही नहीं समझ में आ रहा था कि भाई क्या क्या मसला, क्या असल क्या, किस तरह से ये स्प्रेड हो रहा है, नहीं हो रहा है. ठीक है, एंड एवरी टाइम नाउ जैसे कोविड 2020 इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम कोविड 19. तो इस तरह से एक नई नई थ्योरीज सामने आ रही है. When any theory is generated on the basis of some kind of formulation or testing or practices, then that is basically known as the grounded theory. Now, focusing on the quantitative research designs, I have mentioned some of the quantitative research designs here, which are very common and usually used in while we are doing social sciences researches. Now, number one is cross-sectional research. We have discussed this in the type of researches on the basis of time as well, right? So this is also a quantitative research design. That's why I'm discussing it here again. That cross-sectional research is a research method often used in developmental psychology, but also utilized in many other areas, including social sciences and education. This type of study utilizes different group of people who differ in the variable of the interest but share other characteristics such as socioeconomic status, educational background, and ethnicity. So basically, cross-sectional researchers are the one where there are different people that are involved in it, having different characteristics of socioeconomic status. They have different educational background and ethnicity, but they belong to the same era. ठीक है, लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल क्रॉस सेक्शनल स्टडी की एक एग्जाम्पल ये ले सकते हैं कि भाई हम डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं कराची से और हैदराबाद से, लाहौर से, इस्लामाबाद से, कोयटा से, पेशावर से, सब जगह से हम डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, एक ही टाइम पे डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं हम, मल्टीपल टाइम्स नहीं कर रहे. तो सेम ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल नहीं है. these are different group of people with different social backgrounds, with different educational backgrounds, okay, with different ethnicity. Okay, so if data is collected from different other backgrounds and then they are analyzed, and the data is collected only once, then that is known as the cross-sectional research. And usually the data is collected in the form of numbers. Usually surveys are done. अब सर्वे क्या है वो भी अभी हम डिस्कस करते हैं. Now, cross-sectional research differs from the longitudinal research in that cross-sectional studies are designed to look at a variable at a particular point in time, while longitudinal studies involve making multiple measures over an extended period of time. Cross-sectional research focus on the finding relationship between variables at a specific point in time. So basically, cross-sectional research is focuses on the variables. Okay, how these variables work in a specific period of time. ठीक है, किस क्या रिलेशनशिप है उन वेरिएबल्स का, किस तरह से वो एक्ट कर रहे हैं, that is focused here. Now, the next type of quantitative research design is descriptive research. Basically, descriptive research is also called statistical research. Statistical research, it means numbers are involved, and though the name suggests descriptive, that is description, but this one is a quantitative research design, जहाँ पे data collect होता है numbers में और analyze भी numbers के through होता है. The main goal of this type of research is to describe the data and characteristics about what is being studied. Okay, the idea behind this type of research is to study frequencies, averages, and other statistical calculation. Okay, so it basically describes the frequencies, averages, and the different statistical calculations. Although this research is highly accurate, it does not gather the causes behind a situation. okay, because it is not actually describing anything, तो इसमें details नहीं होती, qualitative data नहीं होता, सिर्फ numbers में होता है, quantitative data होता है. That's why this is a very superficial one, though it is highly accurate, but it is not in detail. Descriptive research is mainly done when a researcher wants to gain a better understanding of a topic. For example, a frozen ready meal company learns that there is a growing demand for fresh ready meal, but uh, doesn't know much about the area of the fresh food, and so has to carry out research in order to gain a better understanding. Okay, so this research is done in order to find out, like for example, if a frozen ready meal company knows that there is a demand of fresh ready made food, then which food, ठीक है, फ्रेश रेडी मील्स जो हैं उनकी भी तो बहुत सारी वैरायटी है, तो उसमें कौन सी ज्यादा जरूरत है, किस चीज की ज्यादा डिमांड है, वो ज़ाहिर है नंबर्स में ही पता चलेगा. और जब नंबर्स में पता चलेगा तो वो उसके लिए डिस्क्रिप्टिव रिसर्च करेंगे, ठीक है, इन ऑर्डर टू फाइंड आउट व्हाट इज मोर इन डिमांड. It is quantitative and uses surveys and panels and also the use of probability sampling. Okay, we are going to discuss sampling in detail in the next few classes, but just keep this thing in your mind for the time period that this is a quantitative research and it usually involves surveys, right? Collecting samples in probation, you can say male or female दोनों के एक particular specific ratio में data collect किया जाता है. Descriptive research is the exploration of the existing certain phenomena. The details of the facts won't be known. So some phenomena is observed, the existing phenomena facts are not known to the person. Okay, so it also focuses on where some phenomena is to be understood. Okay, जिसको मजीद explore करना चाह रहे हैं, that is focused here in this particular research. Now, the next important research is the experimental research. As I have told you previously as well, that experimental researches means there are some kind of intervention, some kind of experiment is there, and usually in pure experimental researches there is a controlled group and an experimental group. Okay, control group is the one where there is no intervention or no changes are applied, no manipulation is done, whereas the experiment group is the one where there is some kind of intervention is applied, some new method is applied, or some experiment is done on them. So the word experimental research has a range of definition. In the strict sense, experimental research is what we call a true experiment. This is an experiment where the researcher manipulates one variable and control or randomize the result of the variable. It has a control group, as I've just mentioned. The subject have been randomly assigned between the groups and the researcher only tests one effect at a time. It is important to know about variables you want to test and measure. So basically here there are two groups, and basically on the experimental group you are trying to measure some variable. ठीक है, जैसे आप कोई नई methodology यूज कर रहे हैं, कोई नई book implement कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, so what is the effect that of that particular variable, that particular method, that particular book. Okay, so this is known as the experimental research. This is known as the true experiment. Another variation of experimental research is the COSI experiment. COSI experiment is a very wide definition of experimental research, or a COSI experiment is a research where the scientist actively influences something to observe the consequences. Most experiments tend to fall in between the strict and the wider definition. A rule of thumb is that physical science, such as physics, chemistry, and geology, tend to define experiment more narrowly than social sciences such as sociology, psychology, which conduct experiment closer to wider definition. Okay, so basically, COSI experiments are the one where there is only single group of people. ठीक है, जैसे उसमें एक ट्रू एक्सपेरिमेंट्स में तो दो होते हैं, एक कंट्रोल ग्रुप होता है, एक्सपेरिमेंटल ग्रुप होता है. यूजुअली कोजाई एक्सपेरिमेंट्स के लिए सिर्फ एक ही ग्रुप होता है और उसके जो है उससे हम प्री टेस्ट और पोस्ट टेस्ट करते हैं। प्री टेस्ट मतलब एक दफा डेटा पहले कलेक्ट करते हैं, फिर कोई चीज उन पे इंटरवेंशन कोई अप्लाई करते हैं और उसके बाद देखते हैं कि इसका चेंज क्या आया। ठीक है, फिर वो जो प्री टेस्ट और पोस्ट टेस्ट होता है उन दोनों को मैच करके देखते हैं कि एक्चुअली क्या डिफरेंस है। देयर इज ऑलवेज अ हाइपोथेसिस जनरेटेड बिफोर conducting these experiments or quasi experiments. Okay, we are going to discuss these experiments in detail later on in the classes. Today I'm just giving you the overall idea of all the designs. Okay, so just keep this thing in your mind that this is the basic difference between experiment and quasi experiment. That usually in experimental researches there are two groups, control group and experimental group, whereas in quasi experiments usually there is only a single group of people. Okay, now, the next is correlational research. Basically, this is also a systematic investigation of relationship among two or more variables without necessarily determining cause and effect. So basically, this is also a kind of research where there's some variables are focused. ठीक है, जो जिस लेकिन इसमें क्या होता है कि इसमें टू और मोर वेरिएबल्स आर फोकस और उनका आपस में रिलेशनशिप देखते हैं कि क्या कॉज और क्या इफेक्ट आ रहा है। ठीक है, जैसे मैं कहूँ कि हार्ड वर्क गिव सक्सेस। ठीक है, so a hypothesis is generated and then it is checked, and these are the two variable, hard work and success, how they are related with each other, how they are dependent on each other. This is what is observed in correlational researches. Okay, the next type is ex post facto research. This is particularly suitable in social or educational and to a lesser extent psychological context where the independent variable of the variable lies outside the researcher's control. Okay, so basically this ex post facto research is the one where research, something has already happened and the researcher is trying to find out something new that has something from what has already happened, ex post facto, facts behind something that had happened before. Okay, example of the method abound in these areas, the research on cigarette smoking and lung cancer. Okay, how cigarette smoking leads towards lung cancer, for instance, or studies of teacher characteristics, or students examining the relationship between political and religious affiliations and attitudes, or investigation of into the relationship between school achievements and independent variables such as social class, race, sex, and intelligence. So how these variables work. Okay, what is the attitude or the achievement, what is the attitude and the affiliations related with the political or the religious aspects. ठीक है, so basically वो relationships देखते हैं कि भाई कौन सी social class है और उसके कोई इवेंट हुआ कुछ हुआ उस पे उसका क्या असर हो रहा है। ठीक है, क्या चेंजेस आ रही हैं। इवन फ्यूचर प्रोडिक्शंस कैन बी डन ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दिस एक्स पोस्ट फैक्टर रिसर्चेस। ओके, क्या चीज रिक्वायर्ड है, एक ट्रेंड भी देखा जा सकता है कि लास्ट ईयर जो है वो लोगों ने इस चीज को ज्यादा, जैसे किसी कपड़े की वैरायटी कह लें हम, किसी को इस लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल कॉटन को ज्यादा फेवर किया, तो अब क्यों किया, किस लिए किया और अब आगे क्या होगा, किस तरह से आगे क्या कॉटन की ही वैरायटी आनी चाहिए, ये वाली चीजें आ जाएंगी एक्सपोज फैक्टो में। ठीक है, समथिंग दैट हैड हैपेंड प्रीवियसली, एंड हिस्टोरिकल रिसर्च भी कहीं ना कहीं टच हो जाएगी, लेकिन हिस्टोरिकल रिसर्च में पूरी हिस्ट्री फोकस होती है, इसमें तो सिर्फ एक्सपोज फैक्टो के समथिंग हैज हैपेंड एंड देन हाउ व्हाट इज द इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ इट इज चेक्ड हियर। Okay, so that's all for this quantitative and qualitative research design. We are going to discuss all these in detail in the coming weeks. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.